The worship experience at One Church International in Los Angeles is electric, and the pastor of One Church, TOURÉ Roberts, is just as dynamic.
Your life began as an epic idea in God's mind. You're not random. So if you reverse engineer yourself, you're going to come back to a brilliant thought in God's mind.
I had an opportunity to worship at One Church at the Arc Theater in North Hollywood, and between one of the 3 services there, to talk with Pastor TOURÉ about his church and his latest book, Purpose Awakening.
Thanks for your time today, Pastor.
Bless you.
Tell me about One Church and what the vision is behind it. I really enjoyed service today, first of all. It was amazing.
Yeah, One Church is really a church for this generation. There are a lot of people who have not felt like they belonged in church, been disenfranchised by church, didn't really feel connected to church. So it's a place where people can come and experience God for themselves and grow in their purpose and their calling, utilize their gifts and their talents in a place that is for them. I believe that it's important that that a generation feels like they have an expression of worship that's theirs.
I saw a whole lot of young people. I could tell there were a lot of artists, singers, dancers. Was it specifically geared for the art community?
I didn't choose that. I really felt called to plant it in North Hollywood, and the artistic community became the fastest growing demographic in the church. And so as a result of that, you know, now 85% of our community are in arts and in media. I begin to be a little more intentional about that, realizing that when people use their gifts and their talents for God, then we can really have a greater splash and impact on society. I believe that media shapes culture. And so the idea, we didn't start with that idea, but when we saw that that's what our unique offering was attracting, we got a little more intentional about it.
Awesome. So that includes the mentorship packages that you have and all of the different things you have outside of the regular service.
Absolutely. The Artist Resource Center, which was really my brainchild, and it's a separate nonprofit. The church is the biggest right now, the biggest funder of it, but it is a separate nonprofit with no religious determination to it. It's 3 multimedia spaces that empower artists, that train them up. There's the mentorship, there are creative spaces, editing suites that artists can use for free, because we want to see them grow and excel and evolve in their crafts.
Awesome. Talk to me about this great book, Purpose Awakening. I've already been in it so far. Chapter 8, moving on to 9 and 10 are some of my favorite chapters. What I appreciated a lot about it was when you started talking about faith and how the faith, I called it the time zones of faith. That's not what you called it, but I just called it that in my head and renamed it for you. But tell me about how you started talking about Christmas Island. And so New Year's hits that island first. Even though it's the new year really all around the world, it takes time for it to manifest.
Absolutely. Well, I think that we have to understand that destiny has actually already happened. In Jeremiah 1 and 5, God says, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. That's heavy. He's basically saying, I didn't know you, I'm not knowing you. I've already seen your end. I know you from A to Z. So faith is about embracing that truth and understanding that things are yet unfolding, but they've already happened. And so you just are aligning yourself with what God has purposed and promised you, what He's got planned for you, and by faith you will be able to live in that realm that manifests what God has for you. And so, you know, there's a passage that says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, which means that if you have the faith, you have the thing. If you don't have the faith, you don't have the things. So something can be in reach or out of reach depending on whether or not you have faith.
One of the things I like what you said about faith is that faith helps you to understand what sight makes you question.
Yes.
I love that. Can you expound on that? That was great.
Yeah, you know, we're so limited by sight. Paul says that we walk by faith and not by sight, because sight basically limits us to 2 dimensions. It limits us to sight and to touch. And so what we believe in by sight is based on what we see. Well, the reality of it is everything that we see started by something that we can't see. And so faith really brings you into a place of logically understanding that just because I don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It could be, you know, it could be outside of this wall, you know what I mean? Or it can be yet to unfold. So faith is a blessing because it gives you greater latitude and longitude so that you're not restricted by sight alone.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned dimensions just now, and you mentioned it heavily in the service today. Talk to me about what you say is the difference between levels and dimensions.
Yeah, levels usually are things that are, you have levels in dimensions, right? But when you want to step into a new dimension, the new dimension is a whole nother stratosphere, a whole nother atmosphere, a whole nother realm where the way that you engage things, your experience, your perspective, your consciousness, all of that is on a completely different plane. Whereas levels, you just move from level to level in one dimension, but that's not really a breaking out of that. And I believe to get to purpose, you can't just go through levels. You got to press into dimensions. There are different ways to look at things, different way to see things, different ways to expect, different ways to engage, and so levels. I believe levels are smaller steps. I believe the dimensions are these things where you read in the Bible when they had some revelation, all of a sudden their life was changed forever. That's a dimension.
Now, one powerful point that you said in that whole dissertation about dimensions is that you're praying for God to deliver you from something, whereas if you would just press into that next dimension, what you're dealing with now was already going to be irrelevant.
Absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Man, you were listening.
I try and pay attention. It was good to me. It was good to me.
Well, you know, to confess the need for deliverance is wonderful, but sometimes the deliverance is automatic when you press into the next chapter of you. There's certain things that we wrestle with, but we're only wrestling with them because we haven't become the next version of ourselves. And so when we step into the next dimension, we realize that these things are now irrelevant because the me over here does not even struggle with that. And so sometimes it's a matter of God, bring me into the next dimension of myself so that these challenges will be irrelevant.
When you talk about bringing me to the new me, a lot of what you mentioned in your book has to do with wholeness, and not just holiness, but being whole with a W, being one full, complete person. Tell me about being whole.
That's God. Wholeness is God's ultimate purpose for his creation. We were broken as a result of our disconnect with the Word of God in the garden, but God wants you to be whole more than he wants you to be anything else. To be created in the image of God means to be created whole. God is holy, and a lot of times we don't really understand what that word means. We think that holy means untouchable. At the end of the day, what holy means, literally and biblically, if you study the words, it means to be whole in every way. So when God says, be holy for I am holy, he's not talking about your behavior. He's saying, I'm trying to get you to become whole, because the stuff that you're doing that people would call unholy is really not unholy. It's about you being unwhole. So it's the byproduct of you not being full, whole, one within yourself, one with God, and complete. And so wholeness is the goal. That's what makes you like God. It's you being holy, or ultimately whole in every way.
Embodying the fullness of who he's created you to be.
Absolutely.
Got you. Got you. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now, that moment of clarity, that's what you call the place in the book. Now, you talked about going to Oakland and having this realization that God had been with you all along, preparing you into that moment. Talk to me about that moment of clarity.
Oh, it was profound. You sense that you're in purpose, but there's a moment where you realize that your past, your present, and your passion for the future are all one. You know, I thought about things that I experienced in Oakland. The family that I was brought into. Some may look at that and say, well, you know, your mom and your dad, they were never really together. Your dad was, a Vietnam vet, revolutionary. Your mom was a college student, and all these sort of things. And then you begin to see, well, no, I needed to be a revolutionary because God was calling me to do something different in the generation that I was born in. But then when I got that from my dad, but I needed to be compassionate like my mom, because power without compassion is a dictatorship. You know what I mean? So all these sort of things, and they needed not to stay together because they stayed together. There were some things, unfortunately, that I did not need to inherit from my father. So you look at all these sort of things and you say, wow, even the things that I lamented were actually all a part of shaping me for my purpose. And there's that awakening. And when that happens, it accelerates everything else, because now you realize that nothing is random, and you lose regret. You're not regretting anything anymore because you know that somehow it's working together for your good because you're in purpose.
Talk to me about failure and how that factors in, because many people think I've made the biggest mistake that I could ever possibly make. Now my purpose has been aborted.
Absolutely. You know, I don't believe in regret, because regret has no life in it. If something has no life in it, God is not in it, and therefore it is not true or relevant to you. I believe that if something doesn't help you, it shouldn't be a part of your universe. I really do. So you have a lot of people that they've made mistakes, they've failed, and all of us have failed, but there hasn't been one failure that I have made that did not work out for my good. Not a single one. When I was 16, I talk about in the book, I was shot when I was 16 years old. And let me tell you, that as painful as that was, that experience brought me to another level in understanding the faithfulness of God, the mercy of God, the love of God, the chastening of the Lord, all these sort of things. But it changed me, it shaped me. And so everything in my life, the good, the bad, the mistakes, the failure, have all been a part of shaping me into who I am today.
What's next for One Church? Because when I was in service today, I really felt like even though the church has been around for a moment, and even though you have large crowds and 3 services and great band, great music, I really feel like I'm still witnessing something that's very much in utero or in its infancy, just beginning to really burgeon out and be what it's supposed to be. What do you envision?
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot. Obviously, we're outgrowing the space. I think that there's a generation that were disconnected from God. They're coming back. But I don't believe that God has brought all of these creative people into the building just to hold hands, sing Kumbaya, we love you, Jesus, and then exit. And so, you know, someone that I very much admire is Bishop Jakes and what he does with, you know, obviously with media and different things. And so one of the things that are happening is now to really assess what we have. Okay, so we've got all these people, and we've got people who are just getting started in the business, people who are directing films, who are starring in films, who are producing films, executives in studios. They're all there. So now is the time to galvanize the resources that are there and do something together that's big for God. So you'll see a lot of entertainment come out of One Church.
Awesome. One more question. What is the major sign? How do you know I am now walking in my purpose?
I think the confirmation that things are opening up. You know, I talk about it all the time, and it's based out of Romans 8 and 19. It says all of creation, that's the universe, is eagerly waiting for the revealing of you. So that means that when you start walking in your purpose, all of a sudden doors that have been closed to you for years are going to start opening. You're going to feel heaven working with you. There's a level of favor that's going to increase. You're going to feel powerful in areas where you were once weak. You'll start to get recognized. You know, some people, if you're not in purpose, you become a stranger. People walk right by you. But when you're in your purpose, the world has to stop and take notice. So one of the signs is an acceleration of success, favor, and you'll just feel the whole universe working with you.